The wind across the Bitterroot don't whisper. It accuses. In November it comes snarling down from 9,000 feet, driving snow like buckshot and cold enough to freeze a man's regrets right into his bones for 21 years. One soul had lived up here alone. No neighbors, no mercy, just a cabin he'd built where nobody else would dare, and a silence he'd earned with blood and loss. That morning, the silence broke. Fresh tracks scarred the virgin snow leaden straight to his boot prints, and beside him, the prints of a horse led, not ridden. Standing there in the bitter dawn, shoulders squared against the gale, was a stranger who looked like they'd ridden straight out of the devil's own storm. Raw face, thin coat, but eyes carrying the kind of certainty that makes mountains nervous. The old trapper stepped from the trees, rifle loose in his hand. And in that frozen instant, the weight they'd both carried for so long suddenly felt like it might finally break or finally be shared. The high country was watching. And it don't forgive easy.
The alarm didn't wake Eli Marsh. He was already awake. 4 in the morning. Same as yesterday. Same as the day before that. Same as every single morning for the past 21 years on this mountain. He didn't need a clock. His body had stopped needing one somewhere around year 3. The darkness outside his window was a particular shade of blue-black that meant 4 o'clock, the way a dog knows its owner's footstep before the door opens. Something in the bones. Something that happens when you live long enough in one place that the place starts living inside you. Eli sat up, slow, careful. 63 years old, and his back made a sound like a branch settling under snow. He didn't wince. He'd stopped wincing at pain somewhere around year 5. The cabin was cold the way November cabins are cold, not the killing cold, not yet. That comes in January when the Bitterroot range locks down and the temperature drops until the trees split open from the inside. This was just the ordinary cold. The cold that says still here, still winter, still alive. He pulled on his wool shirt. His canvas trousers, his boots, moccasins, rabbit-lined, quiet on the floorboards. Ruth had laughed at those boots once. Said they made him look like he was trying to be an Indian scout from a dime novel. He'd kept wearing them. He moved to the stove. 2 birch logs and a piece of pine for catching. 1 match. The fire took on the first try. It always did. Because Eli Marsh had done this enough times that the fire understood what was expected of it. Coffee next. Grounds measured by eye, not spoon. He'd lost the spoon sometime in year 2 and never replaced it. Water from the barrel he'd filled before the latest snow closed the creek access. He set the pot over the heat and stood at the window while he waited. The window faced east. The mountains were invisible in the dark. But he knew exactly where they were, every ridge, every hollow. Every place where a man could step wrong and break an ankle, or step right and find a view that would stop his breathing for a different reason entirely 1,200 feet. That's where he'd built this cabin. Not because it was practical. Supplies were a 2-day ride in good weather, 3 in bad. Impossible in the deep snows of January and February. Not because it was beautiful, though it was, in the way that dangerous things are beautiful. Which is to say, completely and without apology. He'd built it here because no one else would. And in 1860, that had been the entire point. He poured his coffee, drank it standing at the window. The sky outside was beginning to change, not light yet, just less dark. The mountains were becoming shapes, suggestions, the kind of thing you can only see if you've been looking long enough to know what to look for. The horses moved in the lean-to. Sam, his bay gelding, always woke when Eli woke. 20 years together will do that. The paint mare, he called her Birch, was newer. Only 8 years. She still took another hour to shake herself fully awake. He finished the coffee, rinsed the cup, put on his coat, his hat, his gloves, took his rifle from the hook by the door, not because he expected trouble, because trouble on this mountain didn't announce itself. It just arrived. He stepped outside. The cold hit him the way it always did, like a door being opened, clean, sharp, honest. He breathed it in and started his morning.
The trap line took 2.5 hours on a clear day. This was not a clear day. 8 inches of new snow had fallen overnight. His snowshoes kept him from sinking, but not from the labor of it. Every step a negotiation with the ground beneath, every stretch of open hillside a wind problem. He moved through the timber where the snow was shallower, knowing the longer route was worth it. First trap, empty. The storm had pushed everything underground. Second trap, empty. The third trap, a marten. Good pelt. He reset the trap with the efficiency of a man who has done this 10,000 times. Which he had. Roughly, 2 more marten by the time he circled back toward the creek. He slung them in his pack and started home. The sky was fully light now, not warm. The sun in November at this elevation was a pale, distant thing that provided light as a courtesy but no real heat. The peaks to the north were white and absolute. The aspens in the lower hollow had lost their leaves weeks ago, their white trunks standing in rows like something organized. Eli paused at the top of the last rise before the cabin came into view. His breath made a cloud. He stood there a moment, the way he did every morning, just looking, not at anything specific, at all of it. The thing about spending 21 years in one place is that you stop seeing it the way visitors do. You stop seeing the spectacle, you just see it. Like a face you know so well you could draw it in the dark, he started down the slope toward home, and stopped.
There were tracks in the snow, fresh ones, coming up the path from the valley below. Human tracks, one person. Walking, not running, deliberate steps, evenly spaced, though the spacings had shortened toward the top of the climb. Someone getting tired, someone who'd been climbing a long time, and beside the human tracks, hoofprints, a horse being led, not ridden, smart. The path up to his cabin was treacherous enough in good conditions. In fresh snow, riding it was a way to lose a horse and yourself at the same time. Whoever this was, they knew enough to dismount. Eli stood in the trees and looked down at his cabin. The tracks led straight to the front door and stopped there. He moved through the trees, staying off the direct path, circling wide, old cavalry habit. You don't walk into what you haven't seen first. He came around the north side of the cabin and saw the horse first, a roan mare. Sturdy build. Good bone structure under the exhaustion. Her head was hanging low, the kind of low that meant miles, not just this morning's climb. Her coat was rough with dried sweat and fresh snow. She was tied to the fence post by the water trough with a knot that someone had bothered to tie correctly. That was something. People who tie their horses correctly are attention. Then he saw the person standing in front of his door. A woman, young, mid-20s at suit. Her coat was too thin for November up here. Good enough for the lower valleys, not enough for 9,000 feet. It was wet through at the shoulders and sleeves. Her hat was a practical thing, wide-brimmed, the kind a working person wears. She had her back to him, both hands jammed in her pockets, her breath making small, steady clouds in the air. She was not small. That was the first thing he noticed. She was full-figured. Round-shouldered in the way of someone who'd carried weight their whole life, not just on their body in the broader sense. The kind of posture that comes from being looked at in a particular way since you were 12 years old and learning to take up less space as a response. She hadn't heard him coming. Because of the moccasins, Eli stepped into the open. Rifle in his hand, not raised, not pointed, just present, and said, "Looking for something?"
She turned around and didn't flinch. That was the second thing he noticed. Most people, when a man comes out of nowhere with a rifle in the middle of a mountain in winter, they flinch. It's human. It's correct. It's what your body is supposed to do. She didn't. She just looked at him. Brown eyes, dark and direct. Face round, cheeks red from cold and wind. Lips chapped to the point of cracking. She was exhausted. He could see it in the set of her jaw. In the particular stillness of someone who has been pushing through for so long that stillness itself has become an act of will. But she looked at him the way a person looks at something they have been looking for. Not scared, certain. "Are you Eli Marsh?" she said. Her voice was clear, steady, carrying just fine despite the cold. Eli said, "Who's asking?" Not a question, the way he said things. Flat at the end, "My name is Wren Calloway," she said. "My father was Ben Calloway." The world didn't stop. That's not how it works. The world doesn't stop when something lands on you. The snow kept falling. The wind kept moving through the pines. Sam nickered from the lean-to, which he always did when Eli came back from the trap line. But something happened inside Eli Marsh's chest. Something that had been locked for 17 years rattled. Ben Calloway. He'd last seen Ben in the spring of 1863. Ben was 25 years old, eager, the kind of person who asked so many questions that you found yourself answering them just to have a moment of quiet. He'd shown up at Eli's cabin unannounced, which was the first sign either of extraordinary courage, or extraordinary stupidity, and Eli had taken his time figuring out which. Over 2 winters, Ben had learned everything Eli had been willing to teach, which was more than Eli had expected to offer. And then, one morning in the spring of 1863, Eli had packed his things and ridden away without a word, because that was what he did. When things got close, when he could feel the shape of caring starting to grow back, like a bone healing wrong, you had to stop it early. Break it back down before it got far enough to hurt worse. He'd been good at that, apparently. "Ben's gone," Eli said. "Not a question. 7 years ago. She didn't look away. He had a heart condition. The doctors knew for years before the accident. He knew. He just didn't tell me until it was too late to tell me much of anything." Eli stood very still. "He left you something," she said. "Or, he left me something for you. Or," for the first time she hesitated. "Not whackness. Just the particular confusion of carrying a message for someone you've never met." Not being sure which way the thing goes, she reached into her coat and pulled out a small, carved horse.
Oh, that was something. Ellie knew that horse. He'd carved it in the winter of 1862, doing it as a demonstration, teaching Ben that patience could be applied to wood the same way it could be applied to animals, to weather, to grief. You don't force any of those things. You work with the grain. The proportions were wrong. He'd known that even then. The mane was too thick, the legs a little short. He'd been about to start over when Ben had asked if he could have it. "Why would you want it?" Eli had asked. "It's lopsided, because you made it," Ben had said. Like that was a complete answer. Ellie had handed it over. He had not thought about that horse in 15 years, and now here it was. In the hand of a woman who had ridden, how far, how long? Through a November mountain winter to stand outside his door with it. He looked at the horse for a long time. Then he looked at the woman holding it. Then he stepped to the side and said, "Your horse needs water. Truff's got ice on it. Break it before you bring her in." He turned and walked inside. He heard her moving behind him. The specific sound of someone who's been cold for a long time finally being given something to do. A burst of efficiency, movement with relief underneath it. He stirred the coals in the stove and added wood. Got the beans on. Sliced the heel of the bread he'd baked 2 days ago. Hard now, but it would soften in the bean liquid. She came in 10 minutes later. Shut the door behind her. Stood just inside it. He'd already laid the spare blanket on the chair nearest the stove. He didn't comment on it. Just pointed at it once without looking up and went back to the beans. She sat for a while. She just sat. Warming up. Her hands in her lap, steam rising from her coat as the heat from the stove got into the fabric. Good. She understood that some things take a time. He put the bowl on the table in front of her and sat across with his coffee. Didn't say eat, didn't say anything. She ate. She ate the way people eat when they have been hungry for longer than just this morning, focused. Not sloppy, not desperate, but with a kind of complete attention to it. No apology for her hunger, no performance of smallness. She just ate. When the bowl was half empty, she looked up. "I rode from Harlow Creek," she said, "Wyoming. Took me 22 days, alone," he said. "I don't have anyone to bring." He looked at her. "Your father mentioned me?" "He talked about you until the year he died," she said. "He told me that if I was ever in the kind of trouble that didn't have a clean solution, I should find Eli Marsh on the Bitterroot. That's a long way to come on a rumor." It wasn't a rumor. It was the last thing he said to me that was specific, her hands around her coffee cup. Everything else was general. Be strong. General, be careful. You're better than they tell you. But the Eli Marsh thing was specific. Name. Mountain range. General direction. You tracked me down from that. Took 7 years, she said. I had other things to handle first.
She told him, not the way someone tells a story they want sympathy for. The way someone states facts because facts are what they have. Her name was Wren Calloway, 26 years old. Born in 1855 in the Wind River country of Wyoming, raised on a small cattle ranch her father had built over 20 years of stubborn work. When Ben died in 1874, Wren was 19. Old enough to understand what the ranch needed. Capable enough to provide most of it. Not easy, but manageable. Until her uncle, Silas Calloway. Ben's younger brother, who had left Wyoming in 1868 and not come back for Ben's funeral, which had already told Wren everything she needed to know about his character. He came back in the spring of 1880, said Wren needed a man's guidance, said there were things a woman alone couldn't manage, said the Merritt family. The Merritts, who owned 10,000 acres north of the Platte and enough political pull to make or break a man's livelihood, had expressed interest. He had signed paperwork, without her knowledge, with her name, forged, which she discovered 3 weeks after the fact, when Caldwell Merritt rode up to her front gate with 2 of his father's men and a piece of paper that had her signature on it. Her signature that she had not written. He paid off $400 in debt I owed on a breeding stallion, Wren said. My uncle, Silas, used that money to clear the note. In the Merritt family's view, that created an obligation, an arrangement. There's a word for that arrangement, Eli said. There are several words. Her voice was flat. Not bitter? Something past bitter. Something that happens when anger has been processed so many times it's become just information. Caldwell Merritt came in August to make it official. I told him no. He wasn't accustomed to that word. He tried to explain to me that I didn't have the legal standing to use it. What happened? I broke his nose with my father's rifle. A pause. Ellie looked at her. She looked back. Then I left that night, she said. Took the roan, took what I could carry, rode north until I was out of the county. Then I kept going. He got up and poured more coffee. Not because he needed a moment. Wren Calloway's daughter, 26 years old. Rode 280 miles through Wyoming and Montana in November with a forged signature and a horse carved from pine in her coat pocket. He'd known Wren Calloway for 2 winters. 2 winters wasn't long. But it was enough. Enough to know that Wren Calloway was the kind of person who remembered things. Who kept faith with people who'd stopped keeping faith with themselves. He'd never deserved that. He'd walked away from it anyway. He set the coffee pot down. Why now? He said. It's been 7 years since your father passed, because 3 months ago was the first time the trouble was specific enough to need a specific solution. She held her cup. Before Silas, before Merritt, I could manage. I didn't need to go chasing a man I'd never met through a mountain range in November. She paused, and because I was scared. That's the honest reason. I was scared to come here and find out he was wrong. That you were dead. Or that you were real but not what he said. She looked at the table between them. I was scared that if I came here and it didn't work, I'd have nothing specific left. Eli was quiet for a long time. Outside, the wind moved through the pines in the way it did when more snow was coming. Your father, he said finally. He wasn't wrong about everything. She looked up. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the window. Put your things in the corner, he said. You sleep on the pallet by the stove. I'm on the other side. She blinked. Is that a yes? That's a you're here, and it's November, and the pass is closed. We can figure out what it means in the morning. He picked up his cup and moved to his chair by the fire. And that was that.
He waited until she was asleep. She went out fast. The sleep of someone who has been running on stubbornness for 3 weeks and has finally been given permission to stop. He watched her breathing slow, watched the tension go out of her shoulders. She was a different shape when she was asleep, less defended. Younger then, he took the small notebook from the table. She'd set it down when she'd put her coat away, just left it there. Like something she'd been carrying for someone else and was finally handing over. A small leather-covered thing, water-stained at the corners, the cover worn where fingers had held it, Wren Calloway's handwriting inside. He recognized it immediately, big, slanted, the letters of a man who'd taught himself to write from a Bible and a postal almanac. He read slowly. The notebook was not a journal in the formal sense, more like a working record, notes on weather, on cattle prices, on the progress of fence repairs. But scattered through the practical entries were other things, observations, thoughts that a man writes down when he's thinking and no one else is there to think with. At the back, where the pages were newer, the ink darker. Wren doesn't know how strong she is. She's been carrying so much for so long that she doesn't feel the weight of it anymore. She just thinks it's normal. She thinks this is what everybody does. I've been trying to tell her. She listens, but she doesn't hear. Eli would understand. Eli always understood the things I couldn't say directly. That ability to be in a room with the truth without having to talk around it. If something happens to me before I can make her understand, find him. He'll see it without being told. That's what he does. Ellie stopped reading. He sat with that for a while. That's what it was. Past tense. What Eli had done once. Before he'd decided doing was too expensive, he set the notebook on the table. He looked at the woman asleep by his stove, this round-faced, chapped-lipped woman who had broken a man's nose and ridden 280 miles through November,
and somehow managed not to seem like she wanted anything from him except what her father had promised he could provide. Which was what? Exactly? He didn't know yet. He turned down the lamp, sat in the dark for a long time. He did not sleep.
In the morning she was already up. He woke to the smell of coffee, not his coffee. She'd found his grounds, same can, same shelf, but she'd done something different with it. Stronger, more grounds, longer steep. She was standing at the stove with her back to him, already dressed, her braid pinned up, stirring something in the cast-iron skillet. "Cornmeal," she said without turning around. "Found it in the tin with the green lid. I hope that's all right?" He stared at the back of her head. She turned around and handed him a cup. He tasted it, stronger than his. Better, if he was being honest, which he generally tried to be. "The green tin," he said. "Yes, that's for Sunday. Is it Sunday?" He thought about it. He actually had to think about it. "No," he admitted. "Then we're fine." She turned back to the stove. He drank his coffee and considered the fact that a person had been in his cabin for 10 hours and had already located all his food stores, made better coffee than he made for himself, and was correcting him about the day of the week. He was not sure how he felt about that. After breakfast, he laid it out, not unkindly, but plainly. "The pass closes by end of November," he said, "usually mid-month if the weather's been like this year. After that, you can't get down and nobody can get up, not until April at the earliest, I know. That means you're here until spring. I know that too. 4 months, roughly. In a one-room cabin on a mountain, where the nearest neighbor is 12 miles away and doesn't want company." He watched her face. "This isn't what most people sign up for." "I didn't sign up," she said. "I showed up. There's a difference." He looked at her. She looked at him. "Here's what I can offer," he said. "I teach you what I know, how to run a trap line, how to read weather, how to stay alive when the mountain decides it doesn't want you here. When spring comes, you'll have what you came for, skills, knowledge, something to stand on. And after spring?" she asked. "That's your problem," he said. "Not mine." She nodded slowly, then looked up. "Why are you saying yes?" He didn't answer right away. Because the honest answer involved Ben Calloway's notebook and 17 years of walking away from things and a carved horse with a mane too thick. And he wasn't ready for any of that. "You sleep on the pallet," he said. "I'm on the other side." "That's the arrangement." The corner of her mouth moved. Briefly, almost a smile. "Clear enough," she said.
He showed her the trap line that first day, the circuit. North through the birch grove, east along the creek, south across the open hillside, back through the timber. 3 hours on a good morning, longer in deep snow. She listened completely, without interrupting, to show what she already knew. Her father had been the same way. He'd been 25, not a teenager. A grown man with his own experience. He'd just known enough to know what he didn't know. Which was the whole game, really. Wren moved through the snow carefully. She was not fast. The snowshoes Eli gave her were sized wrong, too long, which threw her stride, and the incline coming up from the creek bed cost her more than it cost him. He heard her breathing deepen on the long climbs. Didn't comment, didn't slow down in any obvious way. Just found reasons to examine things on the uphill sections, a reset trap that needed checking, a tree line worth reading, things that required stopping anyway. He never looked at her while he did it, and she never thanked him for it, which told him she understood exactly what he was doing and had decided to accept it without making it a thing. At the fourth trap, a marten, good pelt, he showed her how to remove the animal, how to reset. "You're not just taking from the mountain," he said, "you're part of it. Everything that happens here has to be done like you're planning to still be here next year." She turned to look at him. "Are you? Planning to still be here next year?" Eli looked at the trap in his hand. "I have been for 21 years, he said. "I've run out of reasons to think it'll change." She didn't say anything, which was the right answer.
They were coming back from the line, mid-morning, when he saw the cat 50 feet, behind a deadfall in the shadows where the birches thinned out. He stopped, raised one hand. Behind him, Wren stopped too. The mountain lion was young, maybe 3 years, maybe 4, watching them with that flat, complete attention that has no performance in it whatsoever. Eli moved his hand to his rifle. Slow, no sudden gestures. "Don't run," he said. "Quiet, level, stand where you are. Make yourself bigger, not smaller." "I'm already bigger than most people," she said. He kept his face forward, almost. "Stand straight," he said, shoulders back, eyes on it. He heard her shift her weight, heard her breathe in and steady herself. The lion watched them. Its tail moved, that slow, reading the weather flick of a cat thinking through its options. Then it stepped back into the trees, gone. They stood still for 60 more seconds. Eli's rule. Never assume until a full minute has passed. Then he exhaled. Were you scared? He asked. She thought about it. Yes. But you said don't run, and I didn't want to be the person who runs. He turned and kept walking. Good, he said. That evening, after supper, she asked him what it had been like when he first came up here. He didn't look up from the map he was updating. Cold, he said. That's not what I mean. He was quiet. She waited. That was a thing he'd noticed. She could sit in silence without needing to fill it. It was the only thing I could think of, he said finally. Coming up here, I couldn't think past the next step. Next step was up, so I went up. And when you got here, I kept going up. Until there wasn't any more up. He looked at the map, and then I stopped. The fire made its sounds. The wind outside made its sounds. My father said you taught him that the hardest thing in the world isn't doing something, she said. It's stopping. Knowing which things you're supposed to keep going through. Eli looked at the map for a long time. He remembered that, he said. He remembered everything you told him. He got up, moved to the window. Outside, the snow was falling again from her coat pocket, sitting on the table where she'd left it. When she first walked in, the small carved horse caught the firelight. Tipped slightly to one side, legs too short, mane too thick. He'd always meant to fix that. He never had. You should sleep, he said. Tomorrow starts early. She settled on the pallet, her back to the room. He sat at the window for a long time. Outside, the snow covered everything. Every mark, every track, every evidence that anything had happened here at all. By morning, there would be no evidence she'd come from anywhere. Only that she was here, which, for reasons he couldn't entirely account for, was the first thought in 21 years that hadn't felt like an ending. It felt like a sentence that wasn't finished yet. He went to bed. He did not sleep for a long time, but eventually he did. And when he woke, 4 a.m, same as always, the cabin smelled like someone else's breathing, and somehow that was fine, not nothing, fine.
3 weeks in, Eli stopped counting days, not because he forgot, because somewhere between the second week and the third, the counting stopped feeling necessary. The days had stopped being individual units to get through and started being something more like a current, something you moved inside of rather than against. He noticed this the way you notice a sound that's been there the whole time.
How suddenly?
All at once, and then he didn't know what to do with the noticing, so he went and checked the traps. Wren learned things the way her father had learned them, without performance. If something wasn't clear, she said so. Short, direct, show me again. And he would. And the second time she would have it. What she didn't have was speed. The mountain didn't care. But the mountain was honest about what it cost. The trapline climbed 400 feet through birch grove and open hillside before circling back along the creek. On a good morning, Eli ran it in 2 hours and change. Wren ran it in 3.5, sometimes 4. Her breathing got louder on the long inclines. Her steps shorter. He just moved through the easy terrain at pace and let the hard terrain provide its own rest. Found reasons to stop on the uphill sections, things that required attention anyway. He never looked at her while he did it, and she never thanked him for it. Smart woman. The first time she made him laugh was the end of week 3. They were resetting the trap near the frozen oxbow. The ground was iced over beneath the snow. Getting the stake to set properly required a particular angle and a particular level of patience. Wren had been working it for 4 minutes. It wasn't going. She sat back on her heels, looked at the stake, looked at the frozen ground. Looked at the stake again. Okay, she said, to the stake. Not to him, to the stake. I respect that you're cold. I understand. I'm cold too, but one of us has a job to do here and it's not me. She hit the stake. It went in. She looked at it for a moment. Thank you, she said. Also to the stake. Eli made a sound. She looked up. He had already turned away, was looking at the tree line, coughing. Very seriously coughing. You're laughing, she said. I'm not. You made a sound. I coughed. Men who cough don't hide their faces. He turned back around, kept his expression completely level. Set the second trap, he said. She looked at him for 1 more second, then turned back to the work, but he caught it. Something at the edge of her mouth, just there and gone. Like a bird landing and lifting in the same motion, he went back to the work.
The mountain lion came back in week 4, different location.
East of the cabin, along the ridge where the birches thinned and the rocks came through the snow in gray shapes. Eli saw the tracks first, the particular rosette pattern, larger than a coyote. The nail-clipped drag between them that meant cat, recent tracks, maybe 2 hours old. He held up his hand and Wren stopped. She'd learned the signals. This one meant something is here. She scanned the ridge the way he'd shown her, left to right, not looking for the whole animal, looking for the parts that would be visible first, the tail, the ear, the patient stillness of a body that doesn't need to move because it has time. She found it before he did. There, she said, quiet, behind the gray rock. Left side, he looked. She was right. What do we do? Low, steady, same as before. Stand straight. Hold ground, I remember. Then do it. A pause. He could hear her settle. The shift of weight. The decision. I'm scared, she said. I know, but I'm doing it anyway. I can see that. The cat watched them for 50 seconds. Its tail moved once, then it stepped behind the rock. Gone. They stood still. Eli's full minute. Then he exhaled. Do you ever get used to it? She asked. No, he started walking. But you stop waiting to. She fell into step beside him. What's the difference? Used to means you stop noticing. Stop waiting to means you stay sharp. He kept walking. Longer you stay sharp, longer you live. She was quiet for a moment. My father used to say that brave isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision to be afraid and keep moving anyway. Eli walked. Thought about that. I told him that, he said eventually. Or something like it. 1862. He passed it on apparently. Another silence, the good kind, the kind that doesn't need filling.
The blizzard arrived on a Tuesday, or what Eli thought was Tuesday. It announced itself the way serious weather always did, not all at once. A shift in the wind direction around noon, a flatness to the light. The temperature dropping faster than it should. He turned from the trap he was checking and looked at the sky. How long, Wren asked, before it hits? 6 hours. Maybe 8, and once it hits? Until it decides to stop, she looked at sky. Reading it the way he'd been showing her. 2 days, she said. Maybe 3. He looked at her. Was I wrong? She asked. He looked at sky again. No, he said. You weren't wrong. They got back to the cabin with 2 hours to spare. Eli split wood while Wren stacked it inside, a full cord, enough to run the stove hot for 5 days. She assessed the food stores and reported without being asked, enough flour for 2 weeks, coffee for 10 days if we're careful. The salt pork in the back corner is starting to turn. We should use that first. Already planned on it, he said. Great minds, she said. He almost said something. Stopped himself. The storm hit at 9 in the evening. Not gradually, fully. The way a door opens, the wind went from present to enormous in 20 minutes. The cabin walls held, he built them to hold, 21 years of experience in every log, but the sound was something, not a single note, a chord. Low and high, and something in between that you felt more than heard, the first day they worked. Eli repaired traps, sharpened knives, updated his map. Wren mended clothing. She'd found the needle kit in his repair box and gone through their things methodically, stitching the places that were wearing thin before they wore through. She did this like it was obvious. Like of course you fix it before it breaks. He watched her hands while she worked. Work ruined. The particular callous pattern of someone who used tools, who handled leather and rope. Her father's hands, he thought. The second day was harder, Eli read. He had 12 books on his shelf. He picked up the natural history of the Rocky Mountain Range, annotated in margins going back 15 years and read it again. Wren found the pack of cards. She held them up. Do you play? Not anymore. What does that mean? It means I used to and I stopped. Why? Because playing cards requires 2 people and I live alone. She looked at the cards, looked at him. You don't live alone right now. A pause. He couldn't argue with that, so they played. She beat him. 3 times, decisively. Not by luck, by patience. She played the way she did everything, completely, watching him. Reading the small things. You're better at this than you should be, he said. My father taught me, she said, shuffling. He said cards were math and attention, and not letting your face do things your hand didn't intend. He was right. He usually was. She dealt. If I win this hand, you tell me something true. He looked at his cards. And if I win? I tell you something true. That's the same bet both ways. Exactly, she said. He played. She won. Something true, she reminded him. He looked at the fire. I came up here because I thought grief was the problem, he said. I thought if I got far enough from the places where things had happened, the grief would get smaller.
He paused. It didn't. You can't outrun the things that happen inside you. The mountain didn't change that. It just gave me somewhere quiet to carry it. Has it worked? She asked. The carrying? It's 21 years later, and I'm still here. So either it worked or there was never another option. He looked at her. Your turn. She looked at the cards in her hand. I'm scared that I left everything I knew one man who not be able to help me, she said. And I'm more scared that he can and he does, and I'll be fine, and I still won't know how to be fine. Because I've never seen it done. What do you mean? Being fine and alone, she said. My father managed it, but I watched him. He was fine, but he was sad, all the time underneath. And I don't know how to be fine without the sad underneath. She put the cards down. That's not half a thing. That's the whole thing. The storm pressed against the walls. Eli didn't have an answer, which was honest. So he just said, deal again, and she did.
Day 3 of the storm was when the real conversation happened. It took 3 days of enclosed space, and no exits for the things people don't usually say to make their way to the surface. Like the way floodwater brings things up. Things that were always there, just under evening. The stove running hot. The wind outside dropped to a low, consistent moan. Not better, just tired. Wren was looking at the shelf where Eli kept his few personal things. The photograph. One photograph. Kept behind the books. She'd found it while dusting on day 2 and set it back carefully. But he'd seen her look at it. You can ask, he said. She turned from the shelf. I didn't want to. I know, ask anyway. She came back to the table, sat. Looked at him across the space between them. Your wife, she said. And the child, Ruth. And Emma. His voice was flat. The flatness of something said so carefully it had worn all the way smooth. Emma was 4 months old. Ruth died a week after her. The fever, yes, she waited. Because she knew now, 3 weeks of learning him, that there was always more when he went flat. The flat was where the actual thing lived. There was medicine, he said. She didn't move. A treatment, specific to what Emma had. A physician in Missoula had it. I sent a man to order it, paid him well, told him to ride fast. Outside the wind, he ran into weather on the way back. Storm closed the pass. He sat on the other side for 4 days waiting for it to break. Wren's hands were very still on the table. Emma died on day 3, Eli said. He got back on day 5. With the medicine. In the bag. Unused. The fire. The wind. I have done the arithmetic on that, Eli said. More times than I can count. If I had ordered the medicine 1 week earlier. If I had sent the man before I thought we needed it. He stopped. It wasn't. Wren started. I know, he said. I know it wasn't. That's what everyone said. That's what I know too. He looked at the fire. But knowing and believing are not the same country. You can know something for 21 years and still find the believing hasn't caught up. Silence. Long enough that the fire settled and shifted. Then Wren said, You've been carrying a trial you sentenced yourself to, where you're the judge and the defendant and there's no jury and no appeal, just observation, no heat. You came up here because you thought you deserved this. The alone, he said nothing, did you? She asked. Think you deserved it? I thought it was safer, he said, for everyone else, including my father. The question landed clean. He didn't answer. Which was its own answer, Svup. She looked at him for a long moment. He didn't blame you for leaving, she said. He understood why you went. He said you were the kind of man who had to go all the way in or all the way out. And when all the way in stopped being survivable, you did the only thing you knew. Ellie looked at the table. I should have said goodbye, he said. Yes, she said. You should have. No softening. No, but it's okay. Just yes. He almost appreciated it more than any consolation. He missed you, she said. For years. But he built a good life. He had me, he had the ranch, he had all the things you showed him how to have. She paused. He just also had the missing. Both things at once. That's how it works, Eli said. Yes, she said. I know, and the way she said it, the quiet weight of it, he realized she wasn't just agreeing with a general truth. She was talking about herself. About the missing and the living at the same time. He looked at her. She was looking at the fire. Something had shifted in the room, in the air between them. The way ice shifts before it cracks, not breaking. Just changing the fundamental structure of itself. Preparing to become something different, he noticed it, put it away, took it back out later, when she was asleep, and sat with it in the dark. The storm broke on day 4. The silence woke him, before the light did, that particular silence, not the silence of nothing, but the silence of everything having stopped.
After 3 days of constant wind, its absence was its own sound. He got up. Looked out the window, white 3 feet of new snow, the lean-to buried to the roof on the north side. The fence posts were suggestions. The path to the trees had become a smooth, undifferentiated surface, beautiful, deadly. Both things simultaneously, which was the mountain's way. He started the stove, started the coffee. Wren woke when the smell reached her. He'd noticed that. She didn't wake to sound. She woke to smell. How bad, she said, still half asleep. Pulling her braid loose and redoing it from memory, 3 feet, maybe more on the north face, the horses, lean-tos, but look for this. They're fine, she nodded. The trap line? After we dig out, she was already reaching for her boots. They worked. Hours. Shoveling the path to the lean-to, breaking through the drift against the east wall. Checking the roof for ice dams. He'd built it with a steep pitch, but the eave needed attention. Wren climbed up to check while he held the ladder. Ice dam forming on the northeast corner, she called down. Not bad yet. Break it off before it sets. With what? He handed up the pole. She cleared it, moved along the eave, handed the pole back down, climbed down. Said nothing about the height or the ice, just moved to the next thing. In the afternoon, they ran the trapline trowelin. The storm had brought animals back out. 3 days inside meant hunger, and hunger meant movement. 4 marten. A fox with exceptional fur, and at the last trap, the one by the frozen oxbow, a lynx. Ellie crouched beside the trap. Wren crouched beside him. It's beautiful, she said quietly. Something in her voice that wasn't quite sadness and wasn't quite wonder. Both, maybe. Is it wrong that it's beautiful? He looked at the lynx. No, he said. Beautiful things can be dead. That's not a contradiction. He began the work. Your father asked me something like that once, about a hawk I'd trapped by accident. I told him beauty and death were in the same business, that the mountain wasn't cruel or kind, it just was. Our job wasn't to feel guilty about participating in it. Just to do it with attention. With care, she was quiet. She took the second trap's catch, the fox, and began the skinning herself. He watched from the corner of his eye, careful, clean. Correct. You're good at this, he said. My father taught me to dress deer, she said. This is similar enough. Similar enough is how most things work, Sikhet said. Is that wisdom? Observation. She didn't smile, but something in her expression settled. He turned back to the lynx.
They reached Crestfall 10 days after the storm broke. The supplies weren't quite as low as he'd implied. There was another 2 weeks of food at least. He knew it. She probably knew it. But the pass would close for good in another 2 or 3 weeks. And before that happened, there were things that needed handling that couldn't be handled from 9,000 feet. So, Crestfall, 40 miles south, a trading post, a general store, Harriet Voss's boarding house that served as everything else. Eli traded the general store, pelts for credit for flour and coffee and salt and 2 pounds of sugar, a luxury he didn't usually allow. But he'd noticed Wren looking at it in the way a person looks at something they haven't had in a long time but don't want to ask for. He put the sugar in the order without commenting. She noticed, didn't say anything, but he caught the look. He went back to examining the account ledger. Harriet Voss ran her boarding house the way a ship captain runs a ship, with absolute authority and no interest in what you thought about her methods. 57 years old. Iron gray hair pinned back, with the efficiency of someone who'd stopped caring about arrangement somewhere around 45. She'd known Eli for 12 years. Not well. In the way of people who live near each other in remote country and share no illusions about what they are to each other, she recognized him when he walked in. Recognized Wren immediately after, not by name. By the particular look of someone who'd been on the road for weeks and had just entered a room with a woman who at some point in her past had been on the road for weeks herself. Harriet Voss had that look too, just older. She brought them coffee without being asked, sat down, looked at Wren, Ben Calloway's daughter, she said. Not a question. Wren looked up. Wren looked. You knew my father? He stayed here once, 11 years ago. Paid his bill in full and left the room cleaner than he found it. That's rare enough that I remember it. Harriet looked at her directly. He left something here too. Wren's expression shifted. The particular change of a person who has learned not to hope for things too quickly because hoping has been expensive. What do you mean? She said. Harriet looked at Eli. Then back at Wren. Come with me, she said.
Ellie waited. He sat at Harriet's table and drank his coffee and did not fidget. He was good at waiting. Waiting was most of what his life was, but this particular waiting had a different texture. 15 minutes, then Wren came back. Sat down across from him, set a folded paper on the table between them. Her face was, he didn't have a word for it, not happy, not relieved, something quieter and more complicated. The face of a person who has been told something they already half knew and has had it confirmed, which is sometimes worse than the not knowing. My father left a will, she said. Filed it here in 1872. Legal. Witnessed. Harriet was named as my guardian. He said nothing. Waited not Silas, she said, not my uncle. Harriet? She looked at the paper. He specifically wrote that Silas was not to have authority over anything. Over me. Over the ranch. Over any arrangement made on my behalf, she paused. The signature on the marriage contract. Forged or not, Eli said. If Silas had no legal authority, the whole thing is void, she said. The contract with the Merritts, the debt arrangement, all of it. Harriet's already sent copies to the territorial marshal's office in Billings. He looked at her. That's good, I know. She wasn't smiling. I'm just sitting with the fact that my father knew. He knew Silas couldn't be trusted. He planned for it, a decade before he needed to. He just didn't. She stopped. He didn't tell you, Eli said. No, flat. I spent 7 years thinking I had nothing. No legal ground, no protection. She looked up. And the whole time, there was a document in a boarding house in Crestfall that said I was protected. He might have thought he had more time, Eli said. Everyone thinks they have more time, she said. And that landed the way she meant it to. He didn't argue, because she was right.
Then Harriet came back to the table, sat down, looked at both of them with the flat, considering look of a woman who has seen a great deal and has long since stopped pretending otherwise. Caldwell Merritt was here 12 days ago, she said. Eli put down his coffee cup. He wasn't asking questions, Harriet said. He was paying for answers, offered cash to anyone who could tell him about a woman traveling alone, coming from Wyoming heading north. She paused. Someone talked. Who? Wren said, I don't know for certain, but there are people who'll take money before they think about what they're taking it for. Harriet looked at Eli. He was asking specifically about routes into the high country. Whether there were cabins above 9,000 feet, Ellie was quiet. Doing the math he'd been avoiding, he knows the general direction, he said. Likely, Harriet said, not the specific location, not yet. Ellie picked up his coffee. Put it down, again, 12 days ago. Merritt had been here while they were running the trap line and playing cards through the blizzard and talking about Emma. 12 days was a head start, or not, depending on how serious Merritt was. Amos Pruitt found Eli at the trading post that afternoon. Amos was 66, ran cattle in the valley below Eli's mountain, and was the closest thing Eli had to a neighbor, which meant they spoke twice a year and found it sufficient. A lean, sun-weathered man who spoke slowly because he'd learned that most of what he said was already known by the person he was saying it to. He pulled Eli aside by the coffee barrel. Heard something, he said, about the Merritt son. Caldwell. He filled his cup. His father's dying. Harlan Merritt, lungs. The doctors in Cheyenne gave him until New Year, maybe. That's Merritt's problem, Eli said. It is. Except for one thing, Amos looked at him. Harlan Merritt is a man who has spent his entire life controlling everything around him. And he's dying and he can't control that. He drank his coffee. What a man like that does when he's dying is he tries to lock everything in place before he goes. And Caldwell is one of the arrangements. Caldwell's supposed to be married by the time Harlan dies. The ranch transfers to Caldwell at death only if he's demonstrated he can manage things independently. The Calloway arrangement was part of demonstrating that. Ellie looked at the window. So, Caldwell Merritt wasn't just a man with wounded pride. He was a man with a deadline, a dying father who'd spent his whole life demanding proof, and a son who'd spent his whole life unable to provide it. He's not going to stop, Eli thought. Because stopping means going home to his father without having done it, and that was something Caldwell Merritt was not capable of.
They left Crestfall the next morning. Harriet pressed food on them before they went. Bread, dried fruit, hard cheese wrapped in cloth. She did it without ceremony, handing the bundle to Wren the way you hand something to someone whose hands you trust. At the door, she stopped Wren with a hand on her arm. Your father was a careful man. He thought ahead. He thought about you. She looked at her directly. You deserved someone thinking ahead for you. Wren held that, nodded. Stepped out into the cold, Ellie watched from the doorway. Harriet looked at him. "She's not what you expected," Harriet said. Not unkindly. "I didn't expect anything," he said. The sound of someone who knew the difference between expecting nothing and expecting nothing, so you can't be disappointed. Ride careful. Merritt's men went north 2 days ago. They're looking. I know this country better than they do. I know you do. She looked at him. "Eli, don't do the thing you did before." He knew what she meant. He turned and walked to the horses. They rode back in a different kind of silence than they'd ridden down. The silence going down had been ordinary. Two people who'd figured out how to coexist. The silence coming back was the silence of two people thinking about the same thing from different angles, neither quite ready to triangulate. An hour from the cabin, Wren said. "You knew he wouldn't stop, I suspected. What do? We go back. We stay sharp. The pass closes in 2 weeks. After that, no one's coming up until spring. That buys time, and in spring?" "We'll know more in spring," she was quiet. "That's not a plan." "No," he agreed. "It's a direction. Plans come later, the mountain above them, patient and enormous and completely unconcerned. He's going to come," she said, "before the pass closes." "Probably, and when he does?" He looked at the ridge line above them. "The line where stone became sky. Then we deal with it," he said. "Together," she said. He looked at her. The word sat in the air between them like a living thing. He hadn't used it in 21 years, hadn't let anyone use it about him either. "Together," he said, and the word didn't feel like what he'd expected. It didn't feel like a risk. It felt like the most honest thing he'd said out loud in a very long time.
That night, back at the cabin, fire going, supper done, the small carved horse on the table where she'd set it when she first arrived, and where it had stayed ever since, slight tipped to one side. He got up, went to the shelf, reached behind the books, his wedding ring. In a small box where he'd kept it, not displayed, just present, available to be carried the way he had carried it for 22 years, he took the box down, opened it, looked at the ring for a long time. Then he took it off his finger, slow, careful, like the act itself required attention. He placed it in the box next to the photograph, Ruth and Emma, 1859, the one taken in spring when Emma was 2 months old. He looked at the photograph. "I'm not putting you down," he said, quietly, to Ruth, to Emma, to all of it. "I'm just—" He didn't have the rest of the sentence. He closed the box, put it back behind the books. When he turned around, Wren was looking at him from across the room. She'd been sitting there. She'd seen. He waited for her to say something. She didn't. She just looked at him the way she'd been looking at him since the first morning, directly, without softness and without hardness, just seeing. He went back to his chair. "It's late," he said. "I know," she said. Neither of them moved for a while. The fire went down. They let it. And in the quiet that came after all of it, after the storm and the trip and the conversations with Harriet and Amos and the ring and the word together that was still sitting somewhere in the space between them, Eli Marsh sat in his own cabin. And for the first time in 21 years, he didn't feel alone in it, which was the most terrifying thing, and somehow also the most correct. The tracks appeared on a Wednesday. He was almost sure it was Wednesday. Ellie found them on the morning circuit, not on the trap line. On the eastern approach, the long ridge that came up from the valley below through switchbacks that most people wouldn't know to take. The direct route up was obvious. This one wasn't. This one required knowing that the obvious route dead-ended in a rock face 300 feet below the cabin, and that the only way through was the eastern switchback that looked, from below, like it led nowhere. Someone had taken the eastern switchback, 3 sets of boot prints, coming up, stopping, going back down. Recent, 6 hours, maybe 8. He stood over the tracks for a long time. The cold was absolute. His breath made clouds. The mountain was silent in the particular way of a held breath, scouting, not attacking, counting windows, counting exits, counting how many people were inside. 2 people. They would have seen 2 sets of tracks, 2 horses. 2 cups on the morning shelf where he set things to cool, which meant Caldwell Merritt knew she was here, which meant the pass wasn't going to close in time. He turned and walked back to the cabin. Fast. Not running. Running on ice was how a man broke an ankle, but fast.
Wren was at the stove when he came in. She read his face before he said a word. "How many?" she said. "Not what happened. Not is everything okay. How many?" "Tracks from 3. Could be more waiting below." She took the skillet off the heat. Turned to face him fully. "When?" "Last night or early this morning. They went back down, reporting." She processed this with the stillness of someone who has already run through the fear and come out the other side into the cold, clear country of what needs to be done. He'll come himself next time, she said. Yes, when? Day. Maybe 2. He moved to the rifle rack, checked both weapons. His Winchester, her father's rifle that she'd brought, the one she'd used to break Merritt's nose. Both loaded, both clean. He'd been keeping them that way since Crestfall. We have options. Tell me. We stay. We defend. I know every approach they don't, he looked at her. Or we go down to Crestfall before they come back up. Get Harriet. Get Marshal Taft. Come back with the law and the will and enough witnesses that Merritt can't move without making himself a criminal from one. And if he comes while we're on the way down? Then we move fast enough that we're already in Crestfall before he's back at the cabin. She looked at the rifles. Then at him. Which do you think? Going down is smarter, he said. Fighting here protects the cabin. Going down protects you. I'm not made of glass, she said. I know that. That's not what I meant, she looked at him. What did you mean? He held her gaze. I meant that this cabin can be rebuilt, he said. Other things can't. The room was very quiet. She looked away first. Which she almost never did. We go down, she said. Tonight.
They moved fast, 2 hours to pack what mattered. Pelts, the whole season's worth, the lynx and the fox and the marten. Food for 3 days, both rifles. The emergency kit behind the false panel in the floor. Because 21 years on a mountain teaches a man to plan for the things he'd rather not need. And the box. He almost didn't take it. He stood in front of the shelf with it in his hands. The ring, the photograph. Ruth and Emma in 1859, and had approximately 4 seconds of internal argument that wasn't so much an argument as a single question. If something happens to this cabin, he put the box in his coat, in her pocket, against his chest. Then he went and helped Wren with the horses. They rode down in the dark. No moon, just stars and the blue-white of snow reflecting back enough light to see by if you knew where you were going, which he did. 21 years. He knew this mountain the way he knew his own breathing. Every pitch, every false flat that ended in a drop, every section of trail that iced first and stayed iced longest. He kept Sam to the edge of the switchbacks where the wind had scoured the surface cleaner and moved slow enough that the horses' sled could trust their own feet. Wren rode behind him. Close. Not crowding. Just present. They didn't talk. Talking on a mountain in the dark when there might be men with horses somewhere below you is a way to announce yourself to people who don't need to know you're coming. So, silence. 3 hours down. The stars moved overhead the way they do when you're paying attention to them. Not quickly, not dramatically. Just the long, slow wheel of things that have been doing this since before there were people to watch. Ellie watched the trail, thought about the box against his chest. Thought about Ben Calloway's notebook. He'll see it without being told. That's what he does. He hadn't, not at first. He'd read that and thought he understood, and then spent 3 weeks realizing he hadn't understood at all. Understanding took longer than reading. It required some kind of rearrangement of the furniture inside a person. Moving things that had been in the same place so long they'd left impressions in the floor. Hard to move, but possible apparently. He looked back once. Wren was right there, hood up against the cold, both hands easy on the reins. Watching the trail the way he'd shown her, the middle distance, where threats announced themselves first, Ben's daughter, he turned back to the trail and thought that Ben, wherever he was, had done a remarkable thing with the years he'd had.
They reached Crestfall before dawn. The town was dark. 3 o'clock, maybe, the kind of hour when even the dogs were sleeping. He went straight to Harriet Voss. She answered the door with a lamp in her hand, and the expression of a woman who had decided somewhere around year 40 that surprise was not a useful response to the middle of the night. She looked at them both, took in the rifles, the packed horses. The particular look people have when they've been riding fast in the cold for 3 hours. Inside, she said Docile Gideon Taft arrived at 6 in the morning. Harriet had sent her sword to get him at 4. He was a compact man, late 40s, with the economy of movement of someone who'd learned that efficient was better than impressive. He sat across from Eli and Wren and listened to the whole thing without interrupting. The will, the forged signature, the tracks, the scouts. Then he read the documents Harriet set in front of him. The will's clean, he said, witnessed and dated. Silas Calloway had no authority, We know, Wren said, which means Merritt's claim is built on nothing. He set the papers down. That doesn't mean he'll accept that. He won't, Eli said. No, Taft looked at him. Men like Harlan Merritt don't raise sons who accept things. He paused. I've heard about the father. He's dying. That makes the son unpredictable. Taft looked at Wren directly. Miss Calloway, are you here of your own will? Staying at Mr. Marsh's cabin of your own choosing? Yes, she said, without hesitation, and you want no part of any arrangement with the Merritt family. I want no part of any arrangement I didn't make myself, she said, which this wasn't. He nodded. Looked at Eli. I'll need men, Eli said. When we go back up, I can give you 4 deputies and Amos Pruitt, Eli said. He knows the terrain. And he'll come. That's 6. Plus us, Wren said. Taft looked at her. It's my life, she said. I'm planning to be wherever my life is being decided. Amos Pruitt said yes before Eli finished asking. He was already pulling on his coat. Been waiting for this, Amos said. Man comes into my territory offering money for information about a woman alone. He shook his head. That's not something I was going to sit still on forever. You should have said something sooner, Eli said. I did say something. I told you in the trading post. You told me about the father, which is the same thing as telling you about the son. Amos looked at him. How long have I known you, Eli? 12 years. Years, and this is the first time you've come down the mountain because you needed people. Amos pulled his hat on. About time. Ellie didn't have an answer to that, which was its own kind of answer.
They went back up at noon, 8 of them. Eli and Wren, Marshal Taft and his 4 deputies, Amos Pruitt, who rode like he'd been doing it since before Montana was a territory, which was approximately true, the eastern approach. Because Eli knew it, and Merritt's men didn't know he knew they'd used it, which meant Eli could control the angle of arrival. They reached the cabin at mid-afternoon, everything as they'd left it. No new tracks. They waited. Merritt came at dusk. 8 men. Riding up the main approach, the obvious route, the one that dead-ended below, they came around the last switchback in a line, horses blowing steam in the cold air, and stopped when they saw the cabin. And the people standing in front of it, 8 men against 8 men, plus Marshal Taft's badge, which was its own kind of arithmetic. Caldwell Merritt rode at the front. 35, broad-shouldered. The particular set of a man who'd grown up being told that his size was an argument. Good horse, expensive coat, the kind of clothes that said, I came here seriously and I came here with money in the same breath. He looked at the assembled group. Looked at Taft's badge. Something shifted in his face. Not surrender, but the first fracture, the specific look of a man whose plan has just revealed a flaw he hadn't planned for. Merritt, Taft said, calm, carrying, light down, a pause. Merritt dismounted. His men followed. They faced each other across the snow in the last light of the afternoon. This woman is under legal guardianship, Taft said. He held up the documents, established by her father's will, filed and witnessed in 1872, naming Harriet Voss of Crestfall. Any arrangement made by Silas Calloway is null. The contract with your family is void. Merritt's jaw tightened. That paper hasn't been tested in court. It will be, Taft said. And it'll hold. We both know it. Merritt looked past Taft, past the deputies, past Amos Pruitt, with his rifle, resting easy across his saddle. He looked at Wren. She was standing beside Eli, not behind him. Beside Miss Calloway, Merritt said. His voice was complicated. Not the voice of a villain from a story. The voice of a man who is exhausted and losing and doesn't know what to do with that. My father is dying. I gave him my word. I know, she said. I know what you need, she said. And I'm sorry about your father. I mean that. But what you need from him is something I cannot give you. No one can give you that except him. And if he hasn't given it to you in 35 years, she paused. I'm not going to be the thing that substitutes for it. The mountain was very quiet. Wind in the pines, horses breathing. The last light going from gold to gray. Merritt looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at Eli. You're the one she rode 280 miles to find. Yes, Eli said. Must be something to be worth that. Don't know about that, Eli said. But she's worth it. Which is the part that matters. Merritt was quiet. He looked back at Wren. And something happened in his face that Eli had not expected. Not anger, not defeat, just tired. The particular exhaustion of a man who has been fighting the wrong fight for a long time and has just, in this moment at dusk on a mountain, understood that the debt, he said, the $400 my family paid Silas, void,
Taft said. "The transaction was fraudulent. You'll need to pursue that with Silas, not with Miss Calloway." Merritt looked at the document in Taft's hand. Then he turned to his men. "We're done here," he said, and just turned. Mounted, rode back down the mountain with his men following and the sound of hooves in snow fading into the evening. Eli watched them go until he couldn't hear them anymore. Then he let out a breath. Beside him, Wren let out a breath. Amos Pruitt said from somewhere behind them. "Well, that went better than I expected." "It's not finished," Eli said. "No," Taft agreed, "but it started right."
They stayed the night, all 8 of them, which was 7 more people than Eli's cabin had ever held. It was loud in the specific way of men who've been tense for hours and are now releasing it. Stories, bad jokes. Amos Pruitt's firmly held opinion on the quality of Eli's coffee. Eli sat at the edge of it. Wren sat next to him. She didn't say anything for a while, just sat with the noise and the firelight and the relief of a thing being over, or beginning to be over. Which wasn't quite the same. "He'll go home," she said eventually. "Quiet. Just for him, yes," Eli said. "To his father, yes, and his father will die, yes." She was quiet. "I do feel sorry for him." "Is that strange?" "No," Eli said. "Feeling sorry for someone doesn't mean they get to have what they want." She looked at him. "You learned that." "That's not something you always knew." He thought about it. "No," he agreed. "It's something I had to relearn." She nodded. Turned back to the fire, and that was all, but it was enough.
In the morning, before the others were fully awake, there was a knock, not at the front door. At the back, Ellie was already up, 4 in the morning, same as always. He went to the back door with his hand on his pistol and opened it to find a man he had never expected to see, older than Eli, rail-thin, moving with the careful deliberateness of someone for whom moving had recently become a negotiation. A good coat, expensive, a lifetime ago. A face that was mostly jaw and hollowed cheeks, and the particular gray-yellow of a man whose lungs were losing the argument. He was leaning on a walking stick, and he was alone. Ellie looked at him. The man looked back. "You're Marsh," the man said. "A statement, and you're Harlan Merritt," Eli said. "I am." He didn't ask to come in. Just stood there in the cold of the early morning. As if he'd understood he didn't have the right to ask. "I came up behind my son. Took longer. My horse knows I can't ride fast anymore, and she makes her own decisions about it." Ellie waited. "I heard the conversation," Harlan said. "What the girl said to Caldwell?" He looked at his stick, at the snow. "She was right. Silence, if he hasn't given it to you in 35 years, Harlan said. "She was talking about me. What I hadn't given him." Ellie said nothing. "I wanted to see the man she rode 280 miles to find," Harlan said. "I wanted to understand what that was." He looked up. His eyes were still sharp, still clear. The rest of him was failing, but the eyes hadn't yet. "You're not what I pictured. What did you picture?" "Someone younger," he almost smiled. "Someone who hadn't been through things." "She didn't ride here for someone who hadn't been through things," Eli said. Harlan was quiet. "No," he said, "I suppose not." The mountain was brightening around them. Not light yet, but the blue softening. The outlines of things becoming real again after the anonymity of dark. "I'm going to die before spring," Harlan said. "Flat like weather, I know that. My son knows it. We have not spoken of it in a way that does either of us any good." "That's between you and him," Eli said. "Yes," Harlan looked at him. "I came to say, the arrangement is done. My son won't pursue it. I'll see to that." He paused. "I can't give him what he needed. That ship has been sailing for 30 years, and I watched it go every time and called it his failure instead of mine." He looked at his stick. "That's not a comfortable thing to know about yourself." Ellie looked at this old man in the cold, dying. Alone at 4 on a mountain he had no business being on. Coming to say a thing he hadn't said to the person who most needed to hear it, because some men, at the very end, find the courage they couldn't find anywhere in the middle. "Go home." "Merritt," Eli said, not unkindly, "go home and talk to your son." Harlan looked at him. "Is that advice from experience?" "No, Fall," Eli said. "It's advice from the absence of it." A long moment. Harlan Merritt nodded, turned, and walked back down the mountain. Slow and careful and alone, in the first light of a December morning, Ellie stood at the door for a while after he was gone. Then he went inside and started the coffee. He told Wren about the visit later, after breakfast. After the others had eaten and Taft had gathered his deputies, and Amos had made his final remark about the coffee, and they had all ridden down, when it was just the 2 of them, he told her plainly what Harlan had said, what he'd looked like. The walking stick, The eyes. She listened. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. He came all the way up here, she said. For that, yes. She looked at the table. I hope Caldwell listens to him. I hope he gets the chance. Whether he does or doesn't isn't our business, Eli said. No, she looked up, but hoping is still allowed. He looked at her. Yes, he said, it is.
3 days later, Harriet Voss came up. She arrived midday on her sturdy bay mare with seeds Wren had requested, a book on growing conditions at altitude, and thread in 3 colors because the single color Eli had been working with for years was apparently a limitation Wren intended to address. She also brought news. Harlan Merritt had died 4 days after returning to the valley, peacefully, in his own bed. Caldwell had been with him. Harriet set down her coat. Word is Caldwell's staying on the ranch, she said. Not pursuing any of it. Silas Calloway has been served with fraud notice by the territorial office. He's got until spring to answer it. Wren absorbed this. Good, she said. Is that all you have to say about it? What else should I say? Harriet looked at her, then at Eli, then back. Nothing, she said. Nothing at all. And went to examine the seeds she'd brought like they were the most interesting thing in the room. Which they weren't. And all 3 of them knew it. Harriet left in the afternoon. At the door she stopped, looked at Wren with the direct, clear look of a woman who does not traffic in anything except what's true. Your father was a careful man. He thought ahead when he didn't have to. He planned for things he hoped would never happen. She paused. You know what I remember most about him? In all the years I knew Ben Calloway? Wren shook her head. He never once spoke about you with worry, Harriet said. Other fathers worry. They talk about what might happen to their children, all the ways the world could go wrong. Ben didn't. He talked about what you were going to do, like it was already decided, like he already knew. She touched Wren's arm briefly. He wasn't wrong. She walked out, mounted her horse, rode down. Wren stood at the door and watched until Harriet was out of sight. Then stood there a little longer, and Eli stood behind her in the cabin and didn't say anything and let her have it, because some things need space to settle, and he had learned recently that the space itself was a kind of care.
That evening the fire was the loudest thing in the cabin. One of those December nights when the mountains seem to be resting between storms, still. The kind of still that makes the world feel possible in a different way. Wren was reading. Eli was working the wood. He'd found a still perch in the back of the wood pile, smooth-grained, dense, the kind you almost never got. He'd been turning it over in his hands for 2 days, feeling what it wanted to be. Not a horse. He just knew it wasn't a horse. He'd know what it was when the shape started to come. He worked and the fire worked and Wren turned pages. And then she set the book down, looked at him. He looked up. I need to ask you something, she said. All right. And I need you to not answer with a direction or a plan. He set the wood down. Gave her his full attention, which was a thing he'd noticed she noticed. When he was fully there and when he wasn't, what happens, she said. Spring comes. To me, he waited. I have legal ground now, Harriet's guardianship, the will, Silas facing fraud charges. I have a ranch in Wyoming that is technically still mine if I go back to fight for it, which I could do. She looked at the fire. Or I don't, or you don't, he said, or I stay. She was very still. Here, in these mountains, which have become the first place I've ever lived where I felt like the size I actually am. Not too much of something. Not enough. Just sized correctly for where I am. He looked at her. She looked at him. I'm not asking you to decide for me, she said. I'm asking you, when spring comes, what do you want? The fire, the wood in his hands. The box behind the books. Present. Always present. He'd been thinking about what to say in a moment like this for 3 weeks, rehearsing it, which was not something he did. But this mattered enough that he'd tried to get it right in advance. And now the advance was over, and everything he'd rehearsed was wrong. Because rehearsed things sound rehearsed, and she would know. And that would be worse than nothing, so he said the unrehearsed thing. I'm 63 years old, he said, less set in ways that are probably not correctable at this point. I go quiet when I should speak, and I speak when I should go quiet. I have spent 21 years becoming a person who is very good at being alone, and not particularly good at anything else. She was watching him. I don't know how long I have. That's an honest thing to say. I could have 20 more years. I could have 5. The mountain teaches you not to count on the math. He paused. I can't promise you easy. I can't promise you comfortable in the way that word means to most people. I know that, she said. I know you know. I'm saying it anyway because those are the honest things, and you deserve honest things. She waited. But here is what I can promise, he said, every morning. Every single morning I wake up at 4 o'clock, and the first thing I do now, before the coffee, before the fire, is I know you're here. And that knowing has changed something I thought was finished changing. He looked at his hands. I thought I was done. I was sure I was done. And then you came up this mountain in November with a carved horse in your pocket, and apparently I was wrong. She was quiet. Every morning, he said, I look at you first. Before the mountains and the snow and all of it, he met her eyes. And I'd like to keep doing that. If you'll let me, one breath too. That's not a proposal, she said. No, he said, it's the thing that comes before the proposal, the true part. He reached into his coat, the outer pocket. He'd moved the ring there that morning. He didn't know why, he'd known why. He just hadn't been ready to admit, knowing why. He set the ring on the table between them, Ruth's ring. The one he'd worn for 22 years and then placed in a box. She looked at it. He looked at her. Not that ring, he said. That one belongs to someone else, to the people I was. But I want to get you a ring, a real one. We can get to a proper town with a proper jeweler who can make something that is yours and not anyone else's. He looked at the ring. I put that one there so you'd understand I'm not asking lightly, that this is the full thing. Not the careful thing. She looked at the ring for a long time. Then she looked at him. You're not being sensible, she said. No, he agreed. People will have opinions. People always have opinions, he said. I've been living at 9,000 feet for 21 years, specifically to avoid their opinions. I'm comfortable with that arrangement. Something changed in her face. Real, actual, full. Eli Marsh signed. She said, yes. Is this you asking me to marry you? He thought about it. It's me asking you to stay, he said. The marrying is the formal version of the asking, but the actual question is the staying. She looked at the ring between them, looked at him. Yes, she said. Just that one word. Clean and complete and exactly enough. Spring came the way it always did on this mountain. Not all at once, not dramatically, just incrementally. A degree warmer each week. The snow pulling back from the south-facing slopes first, then the east, then everywhere in stages. The aspens in the lower hollow went from white sticks to the first faint green. The creek unfroze from the edges in. The ice retreating toward the middle, then gone. April the pass was open. Marsh was still at his cabin. Different cabin. Technically, they'd spent 2 weeks in February rebuilding the east wall where snow pressure had found the old weakness in the chinking. Added a window, south-facing, Wren's idea. To let in the morning light, it changed everything. The way morning light through a south window fills a room you thought you knew completely. He hadn't expected that, any of it. He hadn't expected to be standing in his own kitchen, watching someone else make coffee the way they'd learned it from watching him. Somehow both incorrect and better. He hadn't expected to find that talking, when it was to the right person, wasn't a departure from silence. It was just silence with more in it. She was in the garden when he came outside. Not a real garden yet. The ground was just thawed, still hard in places. But she was working it anyway. On her knees in the dirt, with the deliberateness she brought to everything, he went back inside and got the piece of birch from the workbench. He'd finally figured out what it was. Not a horse. Not anything with 4 legs or particular form. Just a hand, small, rough. The shape of a hand open and at rest. He'd been working it slowly for 3 weeks, and it was almost right, not perfect. The fingers slightly uneven. The proportions just slightly off, which was, he decided, correct. Perfect things didn't feel like anything. The imperfect ones were the ones that got carried for 30 years in a coat pocket. He took it outside. Sat on the porch step. Worked after a while. Wren looked up from the garden. What is that? She asked. Not finished yet, he said. Still working it out. She went back to the seeds. He went back to the wood. The mountain was doing what it did in April. Becoming itself again after the long white silence of winter. Sounds returning. The first birds in the lower hollows. The smell of wet earth from the south slope where the snow had fully cleared. 21 years he'd watched this happen. It had always been beautiful. He had always known that. But it had been beautiful the way a painting in a room is beautiful. Something you see, rather than something you're part of. This spring was different. This spring he was part of it, because she was here. It was because she'd ridden 280 miles in November with a carved horse in her pocket, because Ben Calloway had been the kind of man who thought ahead, because Eli Marsh had opened a door instead of letting the mountain stay empty. The open hand in his hands was for her, though he hadn't told her that yet. A thing to stand beside the carved horse. The horse was Ben's. This would be hers, the open hand, not reaching, not grasping, just open. The way things are when they're not afraid of what they might have to hold, Eli. He looked up. Wren was standing at the edge of the garden, dirt on her hands, her hair coming loose from the braid. The south-facing window behind her, catching the morning light and throwing it forward. "Are you going to tell me what that is?" she said. He looked at it. "The open hand, yes," he said. "When it's finished, and when will it be finished?" Turned it in his hands, feeling the grain, finding the places that still needed work. "Not long," he said. Almost there, she looked at him for a moment, then went back to the garden. And Eli Marsh sat on the porch of a cabin in the Bitterroot Mountains. The same cabin he'd built 21 years ago. Different now, warmer now. A south-facing window, a garden beginning. The sound of someone else moving through the space that had been only his. For so long he'd forgotten spaces could be shared. He worked the wood. The morning light moved across the snow that was left on the north slope. The first birds in the aspens below called back and forth. The mountain went on being what it had always been, patient, enormous, completely indifferent to whether any particular man understood his own story. But today, in this hollow, at 9,000 feet, one man did, finally, at 63 years old. He'd spent 21 years being certain the story was finished. And here was the thing no one tells you about being certain. You can be certain for a very long time. And then one November morning, a person comes up your mountain in the snow. And the certainty, quietly, without drama, without asking your permission, just stops, not because it was wrong to be certain, because the story wasn't finished. It was just in the middle of a chapter, and the chapter wasn't done.